Kia ora koutou. I'm going to just cover off today from an urban planner's perspective what it actually, in my view, it takes to plant. It takes political will, legislative tools, an integrated approach, network and neighbourhood plans, and time. In terms of political will, this needs to happen and continue to happen and strengthen at both the central and local government. In my view, many times central government agencies have actually worked against local councils, and I'll give a couple of examples of where that's happened. We need that common vision, and unfortunately the political cycle of every 3 years can break that quite often. We need the funding and finance. It's absolutely essential at the central government and the local government level. And councils have, particularly our council, has developed a lot of support through its policy, strategies and plans, but we're at the point now where we just need the action. We need the tangible outcomes, and to reiterate Simon's comment, now's the time to plant. And I put it out to you, speak up, shout out, because we have so many processes at play, so many decisions that are being made, and we all need to, at all our levels, keep that voice loud. An example of the legislative tools. So the Resource Management Act is one of these, is our main act that is directing how urban development can occur. As it's been spoken, we've been instructed to, or directed to, increase densities, and that's long been one of our objectives for our council and our Greater Christchurch Partnership. We're not actually able to negate all intensification, but medium and high densities, the RMA allows us to identify when qualified matters apply. And this is where the fight is actually beginning. We're fighting to actually retain our scheduled trees and our protected trees. So we're having to argue through in front of an independent hearings panel to continue to allow them to be protected and prioritised against urban intensification. The government introduced new rules called medium density standards, and in that the standard was 20% of landscaping, but unfortunately it had no tree requirements, tree planting. It was only for grass or plants. Now our council submitted against that to central government and they ignored us. Currently, the district plan is an example of what happens in the planning process. We have a minimum 20% now, where at least 50% had to be planted in trees and shrubs. And for every site of 250 square metres, one tree. And at least one tree had to be planted against the road boundary. And all those trees had to be 1.5 metres at time of planting, and they had to be maintained whether they died or diseased or damaged and replaced. The changes to legislation meant that got removed. And so we're going through currently in front of the independent hearings panel fighting for rules for trees. And the RMA is just a political football. And the new government, the coalition, have indicated that medium density may be optional, but we still don't know whether those standards are going to be improved for tree protection or tree requirement. So there's absolutely no certainty that the standards for landscaping protection is going to change. And then I'll just read quite interesting about the coalition government and Minister Chris Bishop, where the confusion continues, or the uncertainty. We are pro-development and pro-growth government. We're going to have targeted changes to the RMA to reduce unnecessary regulation and help unlock development and investment. That's telling us priority for development and investment, while ensuring the environment is protected. Okay, good. That's giving us some hope. Cease the implementation of new significant natural areas for 3 years to enable review, still some hope. Permanently replace the RMA based on the enjoyment of property rights. Again, a lot of uncertainty. So it is horrible, and I hate this saying, but we need the stick with the carrot. Talked about incentivising, But we also need those rules in place to shift us in the right direction, or at least maintain what we've got. So we're boxing on as a council with trying to change the policy landscape. We are fighting, I say fighting, through this plan change process to introduce a stronger strategic objective around tree canopy cover, based on biodiversity, amenity, sequestering carbon, reducing stormwater, all those things, mitigating heat island effects. Because our vision as a local council is to move from what you can see from existing through to the long term. But we're going to have to plan different, and we need the tools to help to do that. It's going to have to move from just having a tree stamp, that was like one thing subdivision planners would get their little tree stamp, stamp it along. We're going to have to become more innovative of how we're actually going to achieve this tree canopy. Maybe it's as much about planning for tree clusters as it is for just lineal tree planting. Another example was mentioned about financial contributions. Yes, the resource management, they had them in, took them out, they're back again. And what we are trying to fight is to include financial contributions to actually mitigate or offset the effects of intensification. As Toby mentioned, if a developer they need to provide 20% of the site for tree canopy cover. If they don't, we charge them. And the financial contributions paid could actually increase, it's estimated the cost to build by about 8%. And yeah, it's a lot, but we don't want the dollars. We want them to plant on the private spaces. So yes, it is a disincentive. Please plant the trees, developers. It is a bit complicated, and this is where planning and delivery does get complicated. We can't double dip. We can't charge for a financial contribution and charge also tree planting through a development contribution. So the development contributions and financial contributions, to be effective, they have to be designed well. And the other thing about development contributions is we have to be signalling exactly what we want to do in terms of a capital work. So this is where our long-term plans, getting back to politically we need our long-term plans to be very, very clear on what we want to a reasonable level of detail for part of our open space strategy. It requires an integrated and regenerative approach. That's the regenerative. Everybody needs to be singing from the same song sheet. We can't have our Three Waters team with a different directive or they're not coordinated. We need our engineers, our designers, our planners. We need everyone to be with this common vision and a shared values. We also need to plan at all these different scales. So sub-regional, we're working with our Greater Christchurch partners to identify the big stuff, the big connections between our different districts. We're working at our city scale, so these are our larger scale initiatives. Anthony will hopefully show you some of them tomorrow about some of our big corridor plantings and networks. Network planning is fundamental. It's a different type of planning. Getting down to the local catchment base, we have actually had really good examples working, developing areas with the Southwest Area Plan as an example, where we planned all the open space first based on a water catchment management plan. We did it in complete partnership with our mana whenua. So we have some really good examples of where we succeed. But it gets down to that really detailed neighbourhood and site design. Site layout is critically important. For when a developer comes in, if they don't do it well, we won't get the tree or the tree will die. So that point down at all of those scales, if they work together, we can actually achieve those tangible outcomes. And the partnerships and the connections and the relationships change at each of those scales. Some of them are common, and some of them do need to change. Developer to a business owner, to a local body, to another stakeholder. And it takes time. Our challenges are limited funding. It stretches out program delivery. Competing priority, we've just gone through a long-term plan, trying to keep rates down, but we've got so many aspirations. Logistics, we only have so many people and so many trees available to plant. And building that buy-in. Our relationship with mana whenua is absolutely critical to every step in the way, But getting those other partnerships as well, and commitments with developers, communities, businesses, agencies, individuals, it goes on, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of resourcing and a really an ongoing positive attitude. You just can't give up. You just got to keep going as an urban planner, and everyone is in your disciplines as well.